Story 1. I stayed in a small coastal town in Oregon, one of those places where everything closes by 8 p.m. and the air always smells like damp pine. I'd just gone through a breakup and wanted to disappear for a few days. The Airbnb listing was a converted boathouse right on the edge of the bay. Remote, quiet, cheap, perfect. I brought my dog, Ludo, a massive, dopey Malamute who usually isn't fazed by anything. That first evening, we arrived just as the sun dipped below the tree line. The host had left the key under a stone frog, as promised, and the door creaked open into a single, open-concept room with windows on every side, most facing the dark water. Everything looked exactly like the pictures. Clean, minimalist, cozy, but something felt off. Not wrong, just too still. The kind of still that made your ears ring because there was nothing to hear. Even the gulls were quiet. Ludo didn't settle right away. He sniffed the floor obsessively, paced in tight circles, then parked himself facing the door and wouldn't budge. I figured maybe he smelled another animal, or was just weirded out by the new space. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not from fear, not exactly. It was more like my body refused to relax. I kept hearing the softest sounds, little ticks and creaks, like wood settling. But then I realized they weren't random. They were rhythmic, repeating, a soft tick, 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 like someone gently tapping on glass. I sat up around 3 a.m., heart pounding, and listened. Ludo was already awake, ears stiff, eyes fixed on the window nearest the bed. I whispered his name, but he didn't move. I got up, walked to the window he was staring at, and looked out. Nothing. Just the inky black water and the outline of trees. But as I turned away, I heard it again. Tick, tick, tick. From a different window now, across the room. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, everything felt normal again. Sunlight filtered in, the fog had lifted, and the forest looked almost welcoming. I wrote off the sounds as wind against the windows, or maybe some animal trying to get in. I was being paranoid. That evening, I poured a glass of wine and sat on the deck. No cell signal, but that was the point, wasn't it? Just silence. Ludo stayed inside. Then I noticed something strange. One of the window panes had a faint smudge on it, like an oily handprint. Not quite human. Too small, and with too many fingers. I told myself it was probably from Ludo's nose, even though it was way too high for that. Night 2 was worse. The ticking came back, but this time, it wasn't just one window. It moved. Tap, tap, tap across the side wall. Then again behind me. And Ludo growled, a deep, guttural sound I'd never heard from him before. I didn't look this time. I grabbed my keys and phone, yanked Ludo by the collar, and bolted out. We spent the night in the car, parked in a gas station lot 20 miles inland. The next day I returned to pack up. The place was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. All the windows, every single one of them, from the bathroom to the tiny kitchen nook, had a smear on them. Long, oily streaks like someone had pressed their face against the glass. Too high for an animal, too wide for a child. I messaged the host, never got a reply. I reported the listing to Airbnb as suspicious activity, but they brushed it off. The listing was taken down a few weeks later, without explanation. I still don't know what it was. A person? An animal? A trick of the mind amplified by isolation? But sometimes, when I walk Ludo at night and pass a quiet house with wide black windows, he stops and stares. And I swear, for just a second, I hear the soft tick, tick, tick again. Story 2. It was my partner Mila's idea to book the cabin. One of those rustic Airbnbs in upstate New York with no TV, no Wi-Fi, and no neighbors for miles. I was hesitant. Isolation and I don't get along well. But Mila loved the idea of disconnecting, so I agreed. The cabin itself was beautiful. Small, wooden, with a stone fireplace and a massive deck overlooking a steep drop into forest. The host left us a bottle of wine and a hand-drawn map of the trails nearby. It felt intimate, peaceful. The first night was uneventful. We played cards, made a fire, and watched the trees vanish into darkness as the sun set. It was eerily quiet, the kind of quiet that made your breath sound loud. At some point, I thought I heard something, like leaves crunching far off in the woods. But Mila just laughed and said, "Relax, probably a deer." Around 2 a.m., I woke up to find Mila gone from the bed. I assumed she was in the bathroom, but after a few minutes I called out. No answer. The bathroom door was open, empty. I got up, heart rate picking up, and saw that the front door was cracked open. Cold air leaked in. I stepped out barefoot, calling her name, convinced she'd gone to the deck. She was standing there, barefoot too, staring into the forest, not moving, just still. "Mila," I said. She didn't look at me. When I touched her shoulder, she finally turned her head. Her eyes were wide, and she whispered, "Did you hear it?" "Hear what?" But she wouldn't explain. She just went back inside, curled up in bed, and wouldn't talk the rest of the night. The next morning, she acted like it hadn't happened, brushed it off. I was half asleep, probably sleepwalking, but I knew better. Something had scared her. That evening, we went for a walk along the trail behind the cabin. We'd gone maybe 10 minutes in when I noticed something odd. A series of small wooden totems hanging from trees, carved roughly, human-shaped, primitive. Mila stopped in front of one and tilted her head. "We didn't see these yesterday," I said. She nodded, then reached out and touched one. The second she did, a loud snap echoed behind us, like a branch breaking underfoot. We turned. Nothing. We hurried back to the cabin. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease stuck with me like humidity on skin. I wanted to leave. Mila didn't. That night, things got worse. At 3:12 a.m., I woke to the sound of something dragging across the deck. A long, slow scrape. I held my breath, thinking maybe a raccoon or possum had found something. I peeked through the curtain. There was a man standing out there. No flashlight, no backpack, no movement. Just standing, completely still, on the edge of the deck, facing the glass door. His face was in shadow, and he was holding something long in his hand. I couldn't tell what. I whispered Mila's name. She was already awake, eyes locked on the figure too. Then, in one fluid motion, the man turned and walked straight into the woods. No sound, no flashlight. Vanished like he belonged out there. We didn't sleep. At dawn, we packed everything and drove to the nearest town. I messaged the host to report what happened. He wrote back 2 hours later. "Don't worry, he's harmless. Happens sometimes when the totems are disturbed. I'll reset them." That was it. No apology. No alarm. I didn't reply. We drove straight home. Mila never talks about it now. Anytime I bring it up, she just shakes her head like she's trying to forget. But every so often, I catch her checking the locks on our doors 3 or 4 times before bed. And once, last winter, I found one of those little totems tucked into the bushes outside our apartment. Just one. I burned it, and I never told her. Story 3. I booked a last-minute Airbnb in New Mexico while driving cross-country. It was listed as a desert retreat, a tiny house on the edge of nowhere. I was exhausted, and it was cheap. That's all I needed. The host left instructions by message, It's down a dirt road for about a mile. You'll see a windmill. Park there. The key's under the red rock by the steps." The drive out felt longer than it should have. Flat, endless land in every direction. No cell service. By the time I found the windmill, the sun was dipping low, and the desert stretched out like an empty sea. The house itself was just a box. One room, a kitchenette, a bed, and floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides. I guess the draw was the view. Nothing but sand, rock, and dying light. I unpacked, microwaved a gas station burrito, and sat outside to eat. That's when I noticed something strange. There were footprints in the dirt, lots of them, circling the house, bare feet. The desert's full of hikers and wanderers, so I tried not to read into it, but I didn't sleep well that night. The wind picked up after dark, whispering around the edges of the house. I kept imagining someone standing just out of sight, waiting for me to close my eyes. At around 3:30 a.m., I woke up with my heart pounding. I didn't know why. No noise, no movement. But I felt something. I sat up and turned toward the windows. There was a man standing just beyond the glass. I couldn't see his face, only the silhouette. He wasn't doing anything, just watching. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I waited, thinking maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe I was still dreaming. Then he lifted his hand, slowly, and pressed it to the glass. I scrambled out of bed and flipped on every light. When I looked again, he was gone. I told myself it had to be a dream, a trick of the eye. The desert does things to your mind. But when I woke up in the morning, there was a handprint, right where I saw him press his palm, smudged, real. I packed up, shoved everything into my car, and got the hell out of there. But I made a mistake. I stopped in town to report the incident to the sheriff just in case. He was polite, listened, then said, "That place gets calls like this now and then. There's no one out there, probably coyotes." I stared at him. Coyotes leave barefoot prints, press their hands on glass? He just smiled and said, "The desert plays tricks." I started to drive off, but before I left the parking lot, an older man in a flannel jacket knocked on my window. His face was sunburnt and worn, like someone who'd lived out there his whole life. "You stayed out at the glass house?" he asked. "Yeah." "You see him?" I paused. "I think so." He looked away for a moment, like deciding whether to speak. Then, I stayed there in '89, when it was still new. Same thing happened to me. One night. Just one. I moved states after that. I asked him who it was, who he was. The man shook his head. Nobody knows. But everyone who sees him once. Never again. But they remember. I asked if it was a ghost or something worse. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Does it matter?" I never booked a desert Airbnb again. I still dream about that silhouette. Not often, but when I do, I always wake up at 3:30 on the dot. And sometimes, when I pass windows at night, I swear I feel someone watching from the other side. Story 4. This was supposed to be a writing retreat. Just me, a quiet cottage in the English countryside, and my laptop. The Airbnb listing described it as a solitary, scenic escape nestled between hills and history. It looked perfect, ivy-covered stone, an overgrown garden, and no neighbors for miles. When I arrived, the host had left a note. "Welcome. The cottage is old. Please treat it gently. Wi-Fi's spotty, but the landline still works. Enjoy your stay." It was cold inside. Smelled faintly of old books and damp stone. The bedroom was upstairs, with a tiny window that overlooked the garden and a hill beyond. The whole place felt like it had been asleep for years. I loved it. That night, as I typed away by the fireplace, I noticed the house had a strange quietness, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that makes you feel like you're not quite alone. I chalked it up to jet lag. But by the second night, I began to notice something odd. I kept hearing footsteps above me, soft ones, just a few steps, then silence. I'd check, of course, walk up the creaky stairs, heart thudding, but the bedroom would always be empty, the floorboards old and uneven. I assumed it was the house settling, until the third night. I woke to the sound of whispering, faint, murmuring, just under the threshold of comprehension. I thought maybe it was wind pushing through the stone. I rolled over, tried to sleep. But then, I realized something. The whispers were coming from the landline phone on the nightstand. I sat up, slowly, picked it up. Nothing. Dead tone. But the second I set it back down, I heard the faintest voice, right behind me. I turned. No one there. The rest of the night, I lay rigid in bed, heart jackhammering, every shadow a threat. I wanted to leave, but I hadn't written anything worth keeping yet, and the cottage had this strange hold on me, like I had to stay. Just one more night, I kept telling myself. That next morning, I went out into the garden to clear my head. It had rained in the night, and the ground was wet and soft. That's when I noticed them. Footprints in the mud. Barefoot. Small. Leading from the garden up to the window of the bedroom, and stopping there. I stared at them for a long time, then walked the perimeter of the property, looking for signs of a prank or trespassing. Nothing. Just the prints, starting in the grass, ending at the window. No return trail. I called the host. She answered on the second ring. When I told her what was happening, she went quiet, then said, "You've heard them, haven't you? The voices?" I didn't know how to respond. She said, "I should have warned you. My grandmother used to say the house remembers. Sometimes it forgets you're a guest." That night, I packed my things and slept in the car. I left before sunrise. Back home, I looked up the property. The listing was gone. I tried messaging the host again. No reply. A few weeks later, I was cleaning out my suitcase and found something I hadn't packed. A page, typewritten. Old, yellowing paper. The title at the top read, "He Came Through the Garden." And the story, 600 words long, was a perfect, horrifying account of everything that had happened to me, right down to the muddy footprints. I didn't write it, but someone, or something, did. Story 5. In 2017, I stayed in a high-rise Airbnb in downtown Chicago while attending a work conference. The building was sleek, modern, full of glass and chrome, but the unit I rented, apartment 3014, felt different, cold, sterile, like no one had ever really lived in it. I arrived late after my flight was delayed. The host had left a lockbox code and a note that read, "Make yourself at home. TV remote is tricky. Sometimes turns itself on." I laughed it off. The apartment was spotless. Too spotless. There was no clutter, no books, not even a stray pen. Just the bare minimum. Couch, TV, table, bed. The only personal touch was a full-length mirror in the hallway, framed in black wood, facing directly toward the living room. Something about it bothered me. It was perfectly clean, but when I walked by, I thought I saw a smudge in the reflection. When I turned back, the glass was pristine. I chalked it up to fatigue. That first night, I passed out as soon as I hit the bed, but around 2:30 a.m., I woke to the sound of the TV blaring static. The remote lay untouched on the table. I clicked it off, annoyed, and went back to bed. 15 minutes later, it came back on. This time it wasn't static. It was video. Grainy, black and white surveillance footage of a hallway. My hallway. Apartment 3014's exact hallway. Filmed from the angle of the mirror. There was no menu screen. No source label. Just the hallway. Empty at first. Then a shadow passed by. A figure. I turned the TV off and unplugged it. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I checked the hallway. No one. When I turned back, I froze. The mirror in the hall now had a handprint on it. Perfect. Palm facing outward, as if someone had pressed it from inside. I didn't sleep that night. I left every light on, and by morning, the handprint was gone. The mirror, once again, spotless. I called the host. No answer. Just a voicemail message in a flat, robotic tone. This number is not accepting calls. I planned to leave, but something about that mirror held me in place. Like if I looked away too long, I'd miss something important. That evening, I stared into it, looking for a clue, something to explain what I'd seen. And then I noticed something. The reflection behind me was off, slightly lagging. When I raised my hand, the reflection did too, but just a fraction of a second late. Not quite mirroring, more like copying. I turned sharply. Nothing behind me. But now the hallway behind me looked darker in the glass, and there was a shape in the corner, just out of focus. I grabbed my bag and left. I didn't pack. I didn't look back. The doorman gave me a strange look when I left the key. "You were in 3014?" he asked. I nodded. He frowned. "That unit's been empty since 2015. They never finished furnishing it." I asked him what he meant. He said, "After the last guy," then paused, suddenly uncomfortable. "Never mind. Have a good night." I reported the listing to Airbnb. They said it didn't exist. No record of my reservation. No receipt. My credit card had no charge. I checked the app the next day. It was gone. To this day, I can't explain it. But every now and then, when I walk past a mirror in a hotel lobby or a public bathroom, I'll raise my hand just to check. And sometimes, just sometimes, the reflection is late. Story 6. It was my dog, Jasper, who first noticed something was wrong with the Airbnb. I'd rented a secluded farmhouse in rural Oregon for a week, an escape from work, traffic, people. It was a restored 1920s home, surrounded by nothing but fields and forest. The listing said, quiet and pet-friendly. It sounded perfect. The house was simple. One story, creaky wooden floors, walls lined with old photos of the property. A little too many, if I'm honest. I counted 19 portraits, all the same house, different decades, always from the same front-facing angle. The weirdness started the second night. Jasper, normally calm, started growling low at the back door around 2 a.m. I turned on the porch light. Nothing. Just the tree line, unmoving in the windless dark. The next night, it was the hallway. Jasper stood there, tense, staring down the narrow stretch leading to the bedrooms. His ears were perked, muscles locked. I looked down the hall. Again, nothing. By the fourth night, I was hearing it too. Faint creaking. Not like the house settling, more like shifting. Floorboards compressing under footsteps. I started locking the bedroom door. That night, Jasper woke me up again. This time, not growling, whining. I sat up, listened. There was a sound just outside the room. Breathing. Slow. Heavier than mine. I waited, hand on the doorknob, then opened it fast. The hallway was empty, but one of the picture frames was lying face down on the floor, the nail still in the wall. It was one of the house photos, dated 1961. I picked it up, and that's when I noticed something I hadn't before. In the bottom corner of the photo, half obscured behind the tall grass, was a figure, barely visible. I checked another, Same angle, a different year. The figure again, closer to the house this time. I pulled down every photo, looked closely. The same figure appeared in all of them, always slightly closer to the house. The most recent photo, the one from 2023, had him standing in the doorway. I packed immediately, didn't care that it was 3 a.m., tossed everything in the car. When I opened the front door to leave, Jasper froze. Standing at the far end of the long dirt driveway was a person, or something shaped like one, completely still. No light, no movement. Just there. I didn't blink. I slammed the door shut and ran out the back, carrying Jasper in one arm and keys in the other. I didn't stop driving until I reached Portland. A week later, I checked the listing again. It was gone. Deleted. No host contact. No record of my stay. But here's the part that gets me. 2 nights ago, I got a piece of mail. No return address. Inside was a photo of a house. My house. And in the corner, near the tree Lanya figure. Closer than before. Story 7. In 2019, I booked a small Airbnb cabin in Maine to finish editing my photography portfolio. It was off-season, early November, gray skies, quiet roads, the kind of isolation I was craving. The cabin sat by a lake, no other homes nearby, just woods. The host left a key under a stump and a handwritten note inside. Enjoy the peace. Please don't move the mirror in the attic. That struck me as strange, but I assumed it was antique or something fragile. I didn't plan to go up there anyway. The first couple nights were peaceful. I'd sit on the porch, edit photos, drink coffee, and fall asleep early. No cell service, no distractions. But on the third night, I heard footsteps above me. Slow, deliberate. They stopped directly above my bed. I froze. It was just me out here. No neighbors, no guests. I waited, heart thudding, until silence returned. The next morning, I opened the attic door. Dust hung in the air like smoke. Wooden beams, cobwebs, old boxes. And against the far wall, half covered by a sheet, stood a tall, freestanding mirror. Its frame was warped, like it had been exposed to moisture or heat. But the glass was clear, too clear. I couldn't see my reflection until I stood directly in front of it. And even then, it felt off. My reflection blinked slower than I did. I stepped back. It looked normal again. Maybe I was just tired. I backed out of the attic and shut the door. That night, I had a dream. If it was a dream. I was lying in bed, unable to move, while someone crept down the attic stairs. I couldn't see them, just heard the boards groan under their weight. I felt breath on my neck, but couldn't turn around. When I finally woke up, the cabin was quiet, but my bedroom door, locked from the inside, was standing open. I decided to leave the next day. While packing, I checked my camera, flipping through photos from the trip. Halfway through the roll, there was a shot I didn't take. It showed me sleeping, from above, as if taken through the floorboards. Shaking, I went into the attic one last time. The mirror was uncovered now, and this time, my reflection wasn't me. It looked like me, but older, thinner, and its smile didn't match mine. When I raised my hand, it lagged, just like in those weird old horror stories. I backed away. The figure in the glass stepped forward. I slammed the attic door shut, grabbed my bags, and didn't stop driving until I hit the next state. When I reported the listing, Airbnb told me it had never existed. No record, no charge. Weeks later, I got a message through my photography website. No text, just an attached image. It was a photo of me, standing in the attic, staring into the mirror. Only my eyes were closed.